Yep.
All right. Going live. You're live.
Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to the shop. Tonight we're going to be having a good bit of fun talking about, well, lying around. Actually, laying out. So we've got a bunch of layout tools here and we're going to be going through some of the uses, different types, what I like, what I don't like, what I use often, what I don't use very often, and where this is very valuable and important. Did you want to do a bench update?
Do I want to? Yes. Give me one second.
You want to do bench update? Because Sarah actually got some time this week and she was able to do a bench project.
I got my legs kind of done.
Check out my wife's legs.
Ugh! So we got the tusked tenons done. I don't know if you all can see that. So anyways, so we got that. So I could just, what did we do? The chiseling and then...
Yeah, we mortised them out this week because we had the wedges last week.
Yeah, or whenever we did them last. So then we still have to put stretchers this way and then put the top on and a bunch of finishing stuff. But
it's coming along.
I might soon have it at the proper height. Yay!
So yeah, hopefully, as long as the editing all comes through, that video will be coming out this weekend. So hopefully, we'll see. Yeah, other videos coming out. I'm actually going to be doing a Moxon vise here soon. I just got a Moxon vise kit in for the hardware and whatnot, so I want to make one of those. I do have an old Moxon vise with all wooden screws, but I've been wanting to make another one and showing off a couple different techniques and methods, so that'll be coming up soon. I've got a video coming up on these cool things, which I've absolutely fallen in love with. Got an egg beater drill we're restoring.
You forgot.
Oh, we got a whole pile of other things coming up. So I'm actually working ahead right now because we're going to be taking off early February. Yeah, lots of things going on in the shop. So let's actually dive into layout. Our kids are also known as Thor. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but they're like pounding on the floor overhead. Layout is one of these skills that you've got to get to because your woodworking quality will only be as good as your skill at layout. If you have Google Home at home, why don't you go ahead and turn that off because I'm going to broadcast to my kids. Okay, Google, broadcast, kids, get off of the wood floor. We are recording downstairs. So yes, there are a bunch of different tools used for layout. One of the big things when people first get into woodworking is the interesting way of laying out either with a pencil or a pen or a marking knife. And until you really get into using a marking knife and understand the difference between a pencil or pen and a marking knife, your woodworking will never be that accurate. Now, yes, I know a lot of people swear by ultra fine point pens and pencils, but no matter how small the point is, no matter how fine the line is, the line always has a thickness. And your woodworking will never be more accurate than the thickness of the line you make on it. With a knife, you cut the fibers, and this is literally the first cut of the saw. So when you cut the fibers, everything on one side of the cut stays, and everything on the other side of the cut goes. So this is infinitely accurate because it is a slice rather than a line. And so because of that, your accuracy of your woodworking can be much more clean. Whereas if you're working with a line, you're always going to be limiting yourself. Now, there are a lot of things where having a line is really not that important. When I'm doing large layout and doing the stock removal, putting a big line on it, I'll use a Sharpie because I don't really care about where the line is. If it's a ½ inch one way or the other, it's really not going to make much of a difference. If I'm getting close to my lines, I might use a pencil because it's just a little bit faster. It's easier to see. But if I'm actually marking out the joinery, it's a knife. And so until you try out a knife and see the pleasures of having an exact, accurate mark, yeah, that's
and they're helpful for like telling you where exactly to put something. You know, like in your chisel or whatever, like you get a little groove.
Yeah, you have,
then
a knife wall that your chisel can go into. And there's the whole thing about the knife wall. where you can actually, you make your cut from the knife, and then you can come in and make a little chisel out and make things fit in there a little nicer. I don't do that a whole lot, but a lot of people, particularly Paul Sellers.
Oh, I just did a whole lot of it on the way.
Well, no, not
but not knife walls, yeah. No.
So let's actually get into some of the marking that goes into this. Let's start.
Are you marking your territory?
Oh, yeah. You get that one for free, folks. So when you are marking around, one of the most common things you're going to do is cut a board to length. And it is hard to get a line to go all the way around the board and then meet back up at a point. So what you need is, first thing you need is to know what is your reference face and your reference edge. And so I'm going to draw an arrow here pointing at my reference edge, and a little curly Q on the edge, denoting that this is the reference edge. And so I know this is my reference face and this is my reference edge. Everything I'm going to do is off of this corner. And you have to know what your reference faces are, because even if you ran this through a machining planer to make these things perfectly parallel, they're never going to be perfectly parallel. There's always going to be slight imperfections. The wood is going to expand and contract. So we need to know what edges are we referencing off of. So I'm going to put the fence on the edge that I'm referencing on. I'm not going to put it on this side here, because if I put it on this side, it might be slightly out of parallel with this slide. So I'm going to put this on here. I'm going to take my knife. Actually, I'm going to do it with a pencil today, just so that you guys can see the lines meeting up. Of course, I'm going to throw it on the floor. So I'm going to put this on here, and I'm going to pinch this. Pinky finger over here, thumb on this side, squeezing it down. If I can't do that, if the board is too wide, I'm going to put my palm on here and use that as an anchor, and then pull it up against my hand this way.
He makes it look so easy.
I'm going to draw the line on there.
Baby hand struggle.
Lift it up, and I want to make sure this is my reference face, so I'm going to keep this on here. Now, if this is a knife, I could actually click it. As I slide it along, I would feel it suddenly click at that spot. I'm going to put a pencil on here. I'm going to slide this up against the pencil. I'm going to draw that line across there. Now when I rotate it down, suddenly the square is on this edge, and I don't want it on this edge because this edge is my reference edge. So I'm going to flip it around, do the same thing on there, clamp it across. It's harder to line up a pencil because there doesn't have that edge to click into. And then when I flip it back up one more time, this is my reference face, so I'm going to put it on here. And rather than making on this mark here, I'm actually going to come back to my original mark. And put that across there, and I want to see, oh, look at that, they line up perfectly. And the nice thing about that is, even if I were doing it with this, I could make my lines come all the way up as long as I am referencing off of the same edge every time. And that's the next big key thing after you get your marking from a pencil to a knife, is always understanding where is your reference edge, where is your reference face. Get those marked on your boards so that you have that for the rest of the process. And that way, as you're going down the road in the future, and you're making cuts on one end, you're making cuts on another, and you're putting marks in different places, and you're measuring off of each side, you'll always know that this is your reference edge and this is your reference face because you marked them. So that's the square. And squares come in all different types, sizes. I don't use what's the word I'm looking for? Combination squares. I don't find much need for them. I don't trust them. Let's put it that way. I've had too many bad experiences with combination squares to trust them. Personal preference. So I use a lot of tri-squares. I find them to be far more standard and accurate, and because all of my squares are right here, I don't need one to do a bunch of them. I've got a bunch of them right here. So that's my personal thing. Next thing is an unsquare, or a miter square, depending upon what you want. And what if we want to actually cut this board at an angle? How do we mark that out? How do we lay that out? So first thing we want to do is, again, we're going to put this on here, and I'm going to put it on my reference edge. You're going to hear a lot of that tonight. And I'm going to, again, pinch the board across, and I'm going to draw a line on here. Now, because I'm cutting it straight across, I'm going to then need to grab a regular square, put that on here, and then I'm going to roll it one more time. And the idea would be to put it on this side, but this isn't my reference face. I want it on my reference edge back over here. So I'm going to put it on this side and slide it over to the mark. And it's the exact same steps, the exact same methodology as a 90 degree, except for I have to use 2 to do it. So we can put this on here, cut that across, and oh, look at that. Absolutely gorgeous. That just, I love it when these wrap back around and they hit their corner right on. So if you're putting it in a weird angle, you just need 2 of them. You need one for your face and one for your edge. But what if it isn't exactly 45 degrees? Then you can bring in your bevel gauge. And a bevel gauge is a fun device because it can be any angle. It is a square that is completely unsquared. You can set it at any angle you want. And most of them have a tightener up here at the top. And so you set it at the angle you want, you lock it down, and you're good to go. The problem with that is having it up here, it's often a little fiddly. And so a lot of the good ones actually have them back here at the end. It makes it a little bit easier to set them up and lock them down. And this is a newer model, Stanley. I don't like this one as much. My favorite one is this one with the tighten down here, but I don't use it due to this one is actually set up for my wife's legs, so I'm not going to be messing with this one. Oh, and then I've got to show this one off. This is my one and only Bridge City Tools. This is a gift this year for Christmas. And this thing is absolutely gorgeous.
When did
sorry,
you
it's
get
probably out
for
of focus a little bit. There you go.
I didn't buy it.
This is, yeah, just pretty. So yes, this is my only Bridge City Tools. And if you don't know, Bridge City Tools is ultra premium. They make Lee Nielsen look cheap. So yeah. So let's do something fun here. We are going to do.
Hey.
What's that?
We have a super chat.
Oh, yeah, super chat. Sorry, what is it?
Alan's
thank
for
you,
the
man.
Cocoa Fun. Alan, you apparently haven't heard. I got an upgrade and now I'm Empress. Just so you know. I didn't choose the name. Somebody else chose it for me.
What we got?
Do you know why Bruce Willis will probably keep making action movies?
Why?
Well, you know what they say about old habits.
Yeah.
You'd like it. Remember, you asked
Okay.
me to marry you.
Back to this. So on this one, we're actually going to do a compound cut. So we're not just cutting straight across the board. You'd normally be cutting at 45 degrees this way. We're also going to tilt the saw and cut this way. How do you make that mark? And you do that just like with the angle. You use 2 gauges, one for the edges and one for the face. You're going to do the exact same thing, but you're going to have one for the edges and one for the face. And so we're going to make these at, let me set these up at some random measurement. Let's do, I don't want to be totally wild. We'll do something like that. Those are our 2 compound angles we need to find. So on this, we can set this up on here just like we did before, making sure we have our reference face and our reference edge. And I can draw my line on here.
You did take down your Christmas light.
What's that?
They just noticed that you took down the Christmas light.
Yes. Oh, and this should have turned on. There we go. Yeah, we got that turning now. So, but with this, I want to make sure I come back.
Stop.
What's that?
Focus.
Focus. There. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
All right. So we made this one on here. I'm gonna put that up. I'm gonna come back with this one, making sure I have my reference on my reference face. Draw that line across there. I'm going to flip it right over and put this, make sure I'm actually marking the line on there. And then with this, I want to flip it over one more time, put this on here, and these 2 lines should line up absolutely perfectly. Let's see what happens. And there you can see, once I focus, that those 2 lines met up absolutely perfectly, even though there's an angle on this surface and an angle on this surface. Angled all the way around, a compound cut comes out as long as you think about it just like a standard square. So from 90 degrees to 45 degrees to any degrees in between, you have a way to lay that out. So we're going to set these aside because all of these are basically the same thing. They just give you a different angle. we want to do other markings and angles. Any questions?
So I have one. So the poorman asked, at what angle should I make the legs on a Moravian style bench?
About that.
So,
not
quite the touchdown, not quite a teepee.
When we did these, I set this bevel gauge at that bevel and I said, that looks about right. And that's what we made the legs at. So that's the angle.
Oh, it's because we got a super chat. I was like,
yeah,
so
yeah,
nice.
I got a super chat. Thank you. Who is that one?
Tom West. Long live King Love Bucket of the White Oak. May your lines always be truly straight.
Thanks, Tom. What's he got?
What's the difference between the Christmas alphabet and the ordinary alphabet?
Christmas alphabet and the ordinary alphabet. What?
The Christmas alphabet has no L.
Oh, oh yes. I love you, dear.
I'm here all night.
So, all of the marks we've been talking about have been across the board, generally across the grain. But we want to actually do some more going with the grain, because a lot of times you're going to be ripping a board down and you need to mark it in. And that's where marking gauges come in. And there are all kinds of different types of marking gauges. But in general, they boil down into two. And so let me just fix this camera so you can see. There we go. So we have the wheel gauge, and this is actually a knife. So it's a knife that will sever the fibers. You don't want this wheel to turn. It should be locked in place and not turning. I know some people like to have it turn, but it was not designed to be that. It will cut the fibers if it's not turning. If it does turn, there's a chance that the screw will come out and it will start to change in its measurement. So lock it down and use it as a knife to slice the fibers. Or you have a pin type, which is literally a nail stuck through the surface. Now, I use this one when I'm going across the grain, and I use this one when I'm going with the grain. And let me kind of explain and show why. Because if I'm going, let me just make a mark at 1 inch. When I put this on here, I want to hold the gauge with my hand there. I don't want to hold it back here, because you're back here, you have leverage and it's going to be tipping out. This fence here has to stay smack up against your reference edge. There's the word. It's not like I haven't been saying it all day. And so we're going to run this on here, and I'm holding it close to the pin so that my force is on the pin itself, not back on there. And you're probably not going to be able to see that because it's not making a mark on there. Now the problem is with a wheel gauge, it tends to grab the fibers, and if the grain is running off the edge of the board, it'll run off the edge of the board and suddenly you're running out here. And so it doesn't cut as well along the fibers. But if I'm doing it on the end here, and I'm going this way, I can slice right across the fibers. And this one, it's too small. The wheel gauge is too small for me to grab it up here, so I have to grab it back here. That means I just have to be a little bit more careful that it doesn't slide out. But with that, I get a nice slice. And this will give you a slightly more accurate cut because, again, it's the knife that's cutting the fibers. And I don't actually sharpen this as just a nail head. This actually has a bit of a knife to it. It's rounded all the way around, but there's two sides to it that are filed down the other side. So if I ever sharpen it, I take a file here on this side and a file here on this side. I don't actually make it rounded. So it does do a little bit of fiber slicing. Itchy. And then you can get into mortising gauges, and mortising gauges have 2 pins. And so you have the 2 pins on here. Now, one of the problems that a lot of people have, and I see a lot of woodworking educators say, you can set up the mortising gauge by putting it on your chisel like this. And generally that's okay, but the one thing it's not measuring is it's not measuring how far is this pin from the fence. And so I could kind of hold that in place and then move the fence over. But that's really fiddly, and then getting those pins in there, that's just really hard to do. So what I generally do is I'm going to take the chisel, grab my marking knife, is I take the chisel and I mark this side and I'll wiggle it in. And I'll come over and I'll mark this side and I'll wiggle it in. I know that's exactly where I want my marks to be. I'll loosen up this whole thing. And this allows me to then put one pin into one mark, slide the other pin over into the other mark, slide the fence up tight against it, pinch it down, and tighten that down. And I can hold them all in one place. And I know now that because those marks were set off this chisel, those two pins are now the exact width apart as my chisel. And it just makes it so much easier to set it on the board and make the width of what you want on the board, and then set your marking gauge to that. And again, I'm going to set that up on here and run that just like that. And you're probably not going to be able to see those two marks. But there you go. So that's how I do a mortising gauge. I do the same thing with the wheel mortising gauge. Is I'll make the two marks with the chisel like I did before, and I'll set one of them into there, tighten that one down, and set the other one into there and tighten that one down, and set that up the same way. Any questions so far?
No.
All right, let me make sure I've got this up right. Good and good. Now this is a weirdo. This is a weirdy weirdo. This is the Stanley. What knows the number? The 95. There we are. The Stanley number 95, which is a really cool marking gauge. And I got this right off the bat, thinking, oh, I'm going to use this. This is cool. There's so many applications for it. I've never used it, but I want to show it because it's kind of cool. It has some interesting features. This is for, well, what you can do is, this is a marking gauge here, and rather than having the mark come out, and you can, the cutter is still on here, so I can set that on there, and I can mark the edge like that. And it is kind of nice because it doesn't have the leverage to come out. But this one also has, well, let me see if I can zoom in on this and really show you. Focus. This one also has a little cutter that comes out here. And the nice thing about that is I can use that if I'm marking the inside of a box or something of that nature. Come back, focus. So if I were marking the side of a board on here and the two pieces are already put together, I can set this depth, and now I can reference off the bottom. And so I can put a mark on the board that's this far up from a stationary surface. And that sounds like a great idea, but I've never had a use for that. I've never had a reason to do that. One of these days I will, and I've got the tool to do that, but that's what that can do. I just have never had the use for it. So yeah, there's a few other little things that this can do, but that's its main claim to fame, is being able to reference off of a flat surface up a plane rather than in from the edge. So it's just the 90 degrees on that, but never actually had a solid use for it. So one of these days, maybe. Oh yeah, let me. Whenever I do a video about what tools should you get, what are great first tools, one that rarely ever makes the list is a tape measure. And the reason for that is, if I'm building a piece of furniture, I can make the piece of furniture to plans, in which case I'm going to use a tape measure. But most of the time, I'm going to make a piece of furniture to what I want. Like when I made my dresser, I never used a tape measure in the dresser. The reason being is that I had a space that I wanted it to be, and so it had to be this long. So I literally brought a board up to the bedroom. I put the board on the wall, and I made a mark on that. And then I brought that board down to the basement, and I said, okay, I want the overhang to be about this much. And I made a mark, and I made a mark, and that spot in between, that is now the width of my back stretcher. And so I made that. And then when I wanted it to come out from the wall, I was like, well, how far should it come out? Now I could make it the standard 18 inches. But I really didn't want 18 inches. I wanted it a little bit more, and I wanted it to be about that. So I took a board and I said, I want it to come out this far, and I made a mark right there. That's now the depth of my dresser. And so everything was just making one mark, and I could then, once I made my first leg, that was how tall the dresser was. Made my first stretcher, that's how long the dresser was. Made the first stretcher front to back, that's how deep it was. Made the carcass off of that, and then I could make drawers to fit the reality. And so I never used the tape measure because I had reality there to then make things fit. It didn't matter what the measurements were, I just wanted it to actually fit that. Now, if I'm working off of plans, then I need a tape measure because the plans say it needs to be 18 inches. Well, then you have to have a way to translate 18 inches. If you go back to a lot of like the frontier woodworking, you will find rulers and measures that are wildly different. And that's not because someone had a bad ruler. It was just because when they were on the frontier, all they said was, that's a foot. There's 12 segments. That's inches. It doesn't matter. That's a foot as long as that's their standard. Then they can transfer from one place to another. So it really doesn't matter what the measurements are, as long as you can transfer off of the plans into reality. And so that's one of the reasons the only reasons I have a tape measure is if I'm working off of plans, then I have that. Or if I go to someone's house rather than bringing a board to put on the wall and marking it, this carries around a lot easier than a board. But I really don't use a tape measure that much in the shop. So I know that it really made a lot of people angry because a lot of people absolutely love their tape measure, and if so, great, use that.
And yet
I'm not even going to get into metric versus English, imperial. Not messing with that.
I was surprised you could even find one for tonight since you're always losing your tape measures.
This is my good tape measure, and it's supposed to be here. It's never there.
It's not me moving it from there. It's too high.
It's probably not the kids, but who knows. Now, the one thing that I do a lot of measuring with is with calipers. Measuring the size of screws and dowels, and if I want to fit if I have a dowel and I want to drill a hole for the dowel, I want to measure what the dowel is and then find a bit to match it. And so calipers are great for that. And for the longest time, I had digital calipers, and I really like digital calipers for a lot of things. Just if I'm transferring metric to English and I'm trying to get the right bolt and nut, having that is great. But for general use, just off of a dowel, the dial calipers are so much easier to read, and it really doesn't matter if you're using metric or English because these basically treat English as metric because it breaks an inch up into tenths as opposed to up into eighths or sixteenths or
30 seconds.
126ths. But something I've recently found is actually this little thing. And I'm thinking about doing a whole video on this little thing because this is kind of cool. This is a foot that can go on the end here. Now what I've done in the past is I use this, which is a little depth gauge, and this is actually from the Pacific Northwest Tool Collectors. Every 2 years when they do their normal meet, they make a miniature prototype, and so this is a half scale of an old depth finder, and I'd love to get a hold of one. I've never gotten one, but it's basically just a rod that comes down through the middle here and tightens down, and I use this quite a bit. Anytime I'm measuring the depth of a groove or a gauge, this works out really well. The problem is there's no measurement to this, so if I'm trying to tell someone how deep is it, I can just say it's that deep. So then I could get out my calipers here and I can measure how deep is the groove. Here, move this over, make sure I'm focused. So I could actually come out here and measure how deep is the groove and get an actual reading on it. But if the groove is wider than this, it makes it very hard to measure one side or the other. Whereas I can put this little foot on here, and now I've got the exact same thing as this, except for I've got full readings on it. And I love this. This is just a cool little device. I actually got it from Tay Tools that I found when I was on his site. I probably order something from Tay Tools every couple weeks. So for measuring depths and having a gauge, this little foot on here is really kind of cool. So I love that thing. Just make sure when you put it on there that you zero this out to here, not to there, because you can see how that's on that. So I'm actually going to move this dial over to 0, and there. Now I know I'm actually at 0 on that, because there's always a little bit difference in there. What questions we got before I move on?
Let's see. Jonathan Haynie asks, can you talk about how to keep your marking gauge from moving on long grain?
Yes, use one with a pin, not with a knife. And then, I mean, one of the, even with a pin, if it's decent grain, let's switch back over to this. If I'm holding it in, my force, I'd say about half of my force is literally keeping this fence against there. And so I have 1 or 2 fingers back here that are actually pulling the fence in, as well as these 2 fingers then pulling it forward. And so I do have a lot of force going that way as well. But a pin will skip over the grain far easier than a knife or a wheel. Those tend to follow the grain and run off the edge of a board. But it's always something, no matter what you have, it's going to want to move it one way or the other. So keeping force on the fence as much as pulling it forward is very important. Yes. Okay. Dividers. If you look in any toolkit throughout the ages in antiques, you will find dividers. And one of the reasons why you find dividers is math wasn't something that was specifically taught that much in the trades. And so you have a lot of woodworkers who just don't have a whole lot of math because they didn't really care about measurements. They had a reality. They had a story stick, and so they had a stick with a whole bunch of marks on it that was for this particular project. They didn't have tape measures. But dividers are great for any time you have to make regular interval marks. So I can actually separate these out to a specific amount, tighten them down, and then I can walk it off. And I can set these out. So if I want to make dovetails that are a specific distance apart, we can set that out. And so I actually lay out a quick bit of dovetail. Any question while I'm setting this up? I want to show how dividers work because it's one of those things that you just don't have to think about.
James Crandall asked, are there any new good makers for pin mortise gauge?
Actually, I don't know. This one, this pin mortise gauge is actually from Harbor Freight, and I love it. I've used it for about 5 years now, actually more than that. And it treats me great. Yeah, that's the one I use. I mean, there's really not much to it, so you can make it. I have at least 2 different videos on making mortise gauges, and they're both pins. But yeah, I can't think of. I'm sure there are. Someone's going to put them in the comments, but I can't remember. So yeah, I can't think of any right now. So let me show you laying out dovetails. Or any particular joinery. Ooh, we'll turn this down, making sure we're in focus. Is what you can do is start right on the edge, and then I'll bring this in. And what I want to do is I want to mark out how far I want the far edge of the first dovetail. So let's put it, I want to put 3 on here. So I want the far edge to be right there. I'm actually going to make it a little bit wider, right about there. And so what I'm eyeballing is I want to, in my brain, split this up into 3 segments. So 1 mark, 2 mark, 3 mark. And I want that line to be ever so slightly less so that I have some space for the pins. So I'm going to put this on here, and I'm going to push that toe in, walk it around, 2, and it should be just shy of the other side. It's a good bit of ways from it. So from that line, that means that our fake pin on this side is going to be about that size. Zoom this in a little bit more for you. Should be able to see those dots.
We can.
And so then I can start from this side, and I can lay that out. And now I'm seeing that my 3 tails are really narrow. They're only about that big, and I want my tails bigger than that. So I'm going to spread this out a little bit wider than that. I'm actually going to move it out to right about there. And I'm going to move this to this edge of the board. And so I can push that in. 1, 2, loosened. 3. Oh no, I'm off the board. That means it's got to be smaller than that. And this is one of the things you don't need math when you can just do a little bit of trial and error. Let's try it on this one. Move it a little farther over this way. So we got 1, 2, 3, really thin pin. So if you're one of those people who like really, really thin pins, there you go. 2, 3. Got a little more in a saw's cut, or if I want to make it a little bit bigger, well, then I can just move it out a little bit. So you can actually play with this and go back and forth and do trial and error with that. If you're ever laying out octagons and other things like that, these are great. You can actually use them to draw a circle, and then you can walk out around the circle. And if it's a little too long, then you make them a little shorter and walk it out again. And you just do that trial and error until you get it the right amount. And you can get the same amount of sides around the circle, and then you can draw rays out from that center point you created, and you can divide the board into multiple pieces. It's a fantastic piece of advice, marking gauge. And speaking of which, if you ever look at a lot of any of the old miter boxes, you'll see, rather than degrees or angles, you'll see markings on there. And you'll have a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And it kind of makes you wonder, what are those? And those are the angles you need to create a 4-sided box, a 5-sided box, a 6-sided box, a 7-sided box, an 8-sided box. And so rather than making the math of what angle do I need to make a 5-sided box, they just put a 5 on there. And so you line it up with a 5, and you cut it at that spot, you're going to make a 5-sided box. So they didn't care what the angle was, they just wanted to make something with 5 sides, so they need that cut on the mortising box. What's the word? Miter box, there we are. So it's one of those really cool things, but yeah, a lot of the tools in history past weren't actually made on measurements, they were made on the reality of things around. What questions we got?
Let's see, I'm sticking to the marking gauge questions, and then I'll get to the other ones.
Okay.
AMRN123 asked, what's a good brand of caliper?
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I mean, there are really cool ones out there, and honestly, the calipers itself and actual function, the cheap ones will do you fantastically. The better quality ones just look better, and they feel better, and then you look at them and they go, ooh, that's nice. Lost Art Press has, what's the maker? They have some hand-forged ones. They're absolutely gorgeous. You put them in your hand, they feel good, but they won't do anything better than the cheap one. It's one of those things that you don't need to. Oh wait, caliper. I'm thinking divider. Sorry, caliper. I have no idea. My digital one is the cheap one from Harbor Freight. This is one I picked up at a garage sale.
Hey,
CMYK.
There should be a really nice caliper around here that I bought you.
Yes, it's actually right beside you.
I was gonna say, is it this one?
Yeah. Very nice. That one's kind of cool. It's a digital that it'll tell you decimal inches. It'll give you fractions as well as metric. So it's really nice to flip back and forth between the metrics and digitals.
Oh, look at another measuring tape over
Yeah,
here.
I've never, never really messed with brands. I just buy the cheap one, or because I wanted one that does fractions, and Sarah got me that one for Christmas last year.
I think so.
No, it was my birthday last year.
Your birthday?
Yeah.
It was last year.
It was after I brought that home, so yeah. This one I got at a garage sale. Don't know if it's any good, but it works well for me. What else we got?
All right, so these questions are a little off topic now.
Okay.
Will asked, what's better for vise jaw lining, cork or leather?
Leather. Cork gets torn up, and it's a mess to replace. Leather will stretch and peel off, but when it's time to replace it, you can peel it off. Cork, you can't peel it off. It's just, it turns into a mess. Now, I made a lot of people angry because there's a lot of cork lovers out there. I'm not one of them.
Are they corky?
Yes.
Sorry. All right, there was one on topic. I accidentally skipped it. Clockman45 asked, where would I find a P&M gauge?
P&M?
I'm just reading the question.
Someone in the comments will let me know what that is. I don't remember what P&M. I'm thinking T&M? Is it M and T, mortise and tenon? No. Yeah, I don't know. P&M.
Okay. So then Clockman also asked, I have an idea for a box and I want to make it out of zebra wood. Is that a softwood or hardwood?
Zebrawood's hardwood. And it's a relatively hardwood. Yeah. It's about the same as ash, if I had to guess. Feels and works about the same as ash as well.
Pin and mortise gauge. I thought they said pin and mortise. They're yelling at
What do
me.
you mean by pin and mortise?
The
I'm
question.
guessing a mortising
Where would I
gauge with
find
pins?
a pin and mortise?
I don't know.
A pin mortise. Is there a pin mortise? I don't know.
Mortise gauge.
That they all seem to
There
understand.
are, one of the fun things about woodworking in general is there are 100 names for every tool in the shop. And so, yeah, and every tradition in every country, they all have different names for the exact same thing. And so sometimes I don't know all the terms. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know what I mean by pin and mortise. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, this is a fun one that I wanted to show off. This is actually from DFM Toolworks, and it's a great square for marking across things. So I can use it as a standard square, but with this I can lock it on here, and I can. It references off the face this way. It's thick enough for that, so I can set it on here and mark on this face as well as this face, and know that these are at 90 degrees. Plus, if I'm doing center finding, I can put pins through here and here, and those pins will then lock against the surface, putting a pencil down through this, and use that to mark the center. And this center one here has a pencil hole coming through it. So this is kind of a really cool device. He has a bunch of other things he shows off. This is one that was a mistake, and so the logos are all over the place. But yeah, this is kind of fun.
They're saying your Harbor Freight pin gauge is a pin and mortise.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was thinking. So it's a pin gauge, a mortise gauge that has pins rather than a mortise gauge that has wheel cutters or knives. If you get into Japanese, they, rather than having pins or wheels, they actually have a knife blade that sticks out the side and cuts. And it's a rather thick knife blade. So it's kind of it's basically like a marking knife that sticks out the side and marks on. And you'll even find these with pencils, which I find to be hilarious, but okay. What's next?
Chef Andrew's Cooking Show asked, what are good places to get hand planes?
If you want antiques, there are hundreds of thousands of places all over the world. I've tried to collate as much as I can. I have an entire website that's dedicated to finding antique hand tools, handtoolfinder.com. And on there I have a map of all the places around the world that I know of where you can go and find it, as well as a list of online sellers that are, many of them in different countries, and others that are willing to ship around the world. And they're trusted online sellers, and they usually have a catalog of tools that they have in stock at the time. And then I also have a list of collecting groups. So there's the MWTCA, Midwest Tool Collectors Association. There's the Rocky Mountain Tool Collectors Association. There's California. There's the East Coast. There's Canada. There's one in Europe. There's one in Australia. Yeah, and so there's quite a few of them. But yeah, handtoolfinder.com. If you're wanting to buy new, then it depends on what brand you want as to where you want to find it. But I'm guessing when you say where can I find them, you're generally talking about antiques. What's next?
Richard Wright said, can James show how the tip catch of a tape is supposed to slip?
Yeah, this is one of those things that I've seen at least 3 different YouTube videos that complain about tape measures where the tip is wobbly on there and that this slides in and out. Oop. I think I just set off the alarm on my car.
I'm waiting for Melody to run down the stairs.
Come on, turn off, turn off. There it goes.
JJ's trying to hot wire it right now.
So yeah, this slides in and out, and that really drives people crazy. So I've seen people online, you can set that on an anvil and drive these down in and pinch it so that this doesn't move. Because how accurate can your tape measure be if that moves? But the cool thing about this is that all tape measures move, and that means they're all defective. No, that means that that this actually has a meaning why it moves. This movement is actually the exact same amount as the thickness of this tab. So this tab has a thickness to it. So if that were locked in place, then I would get a different measurement from the outside of something as I would from the inside of something, because there's a thickness to this tab. But that tab moves by its thickness. So if I pull it, that tab moves out, and if I push it, that tab moves in, so that I'm always measuring from the same starting point. So that should move, and it moves at the appropriate amount. So I know exactly what it is if I'm measuring from something or across something. So one of those kind of cool features that people don't realize, it moves on purpose. Don't drive it down in. I've seen several YouTube videos that try and pound that down in. It's like, ah. Yeah, takes all kinds. What's next? Besides the car alarm. Should I put that back in my pocket lest I forget them?
If you had to pick 2 marking / setting tools, what could you not live without?
The 2 most common tools that I use more than anything else are my 6-inch tri-square. This is an old Stanley. I really like this one. It's just a good standby, good and hard. It also has the bevel on here, so if I need to do 45, I can do 45 with this one. It's not great because that isn't a huge reference surface, but it does work. That and a marking knife. This is something I can do most anything. Even a mortising gauge, I can make a mark at one end of the board, and then I can make a mark at the other end of the board, and then I get a straight line and I draw the line between them. That's basically what a marking gauge will do. So these are the key things that you use more than anything else. Number 2 would probably be this Stanley marking gauge with the pin. I guess that'd be number 3. This one is my go-to if I'm going to be marking most anything. That's the one I grab more than any other. Number 3 would probably be a bevel gauge, because you can always do 45 degrees with a bevel gauge. And then from that point on, you're just buying more of what you want. You can never have enough marking gauges. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have 10 marking gauges in here, and I've had several times where they've all been set up for something, and I need another one. Because if I'm doing a bunch of joinery on the bench, every one of them is set up for a different mark, a different joinery, and I can't change them. Like this one that's currently set up for Sarah's legs, and it's been there because the bench has taken so long. I can't adjust that because it's set up for that. And so you can never have enough of them. I've never run out. Oh, okay, no, I did have one time I ran out of bevel gauges, but now I have at least one more that I got this one for Christmas, so I haven't run out of them in a while. What's next?
Jonny 5 says, James, loved your videos on chisels, so much so that I purchased my own set of Richter chisels. My question is, how was the prepping process for you with those chisels? None of mine have square tips.
I didn't prep them at all. You're going to have a lot of people who really, really complain about flat backs being absolutely flat. They're flat enough. Don't worry about it. If you're spending hours flattening it, you're overthinking it way big time. Being perfectly square, none of my chisels are perfectly square. It doesn't matter. It's not necessary. If you're trying to spend time making sure that they're perfectly square, it really doesn't matter.
Go upstairs.
The amount of times where you need that to be perfectly square is almost non-existent. Maybe once every 2 to 3 years, in which case then you can take a little time to work on it and make it square. But yeah, a small chisel like this, you're not going to be able to tell. But let me grab a big one here. 1.5 inches, square. Let's see how far out we are. Well, it's pretty close. It's probably about a 1/16 inch off from one side to the other. Maybe a little less than that, but pretty close to that. It's actually better than I was expecting. But no, I didn't do anything. I pulled them straight out of the box and started using them. Yeah, see that one's pretty wild. Here, I'll show you this. Here, let me zoom in so you can actually see. Here, turn around. There, I don't can see that. It's out of square a good bit. Oh, I'm not on the wrong camera.
Oh, I didn't even notice. Sorry, because I was trying to catch up on the chat.
There. It's out of square a good solid bit. Yeah, I don't care about chisels being square. You don't need them. If it's out of square one way, once it starts to become obvious, like this one is very obviously out of square, next time I sharpen, I'm just going to put more pressure on the other side. And that's all you need. So if a chisel is flat, you put it on the bench and you don't see any space lifting up, that's flat enough. Don't need to overdo it. I see people doing hours and hours flattening chisels, and it's pointless. It doesn't give you any better work or quality one way or the other. And a perfectly square tip feels good and looks good, but functionally doesn't make a difference. So don't worry about it. What's next?
Jonathan Haynie asked, do you ever use a kerfing saw before resawing, a la Tom Fidgen?
I used to. It is great for a beginner. The problem is the kerfing plane takes more work. Mine's kind of pinched in right now. I don't have a video making that one there. It takes more work to remove that material than just cutting it. And so when you're first getting started and your sawing isn't very accurate, it might be worth it to use that extra time to make the kerf to try and hold the saw where it is. But that being said, the saw can still jump out of that kerf. So the kerf isn't a guarantee. It's more like training wheels that you probably won't fall over. And they're pretty slim training wheels. You can fall over. But it's going to take you more time to cut that kerf than it is to just cut it. And so now that my skill is to the point where I can just cut it and stay right on the line and not think about it, I don't use it because it's one more step that takes more time. But if you're first getting started, it might be worth it. And it's a fun tool to have. And I have a video on making that one. You can see with that, as well as like 3 or 4 videos making frame saws. So yeah. Actually, I think I have 2 videos making kerfing planes. I think I do. What's next?
James Crandall asks, can you talk about either buying or making a panel gauge?
Oh, yeah, actually, I should have brought that up. I have a video on making this one, and this one is just, here. Let's back up that zoom. This one is an octagonal beam with a brass inlay, and that's for the thumb screw to bite down into. And this one is a really simple panel gauge. And I like this one in that it doesn't have the rabbet here. For a lot of things, I like to be able to turn it and lean it one way or the other. If you have a rabbet, it holds onto the, make sure, if you have a rabbet, it holds onto the corner of the work a lot easier and keeps it flat. But for this, I usually do this two-handed, as I'll have one hand out here and I'll have one hand out here by the pin. And this hand is just pushing this in and keeping this fence locked against it so that this doesn't travel and move out. And then this hand out here is actually what's moving the whole thing forward. And I can mark with that. And so this just has a pin sticking out right there. But yeah, I like this one. That's an old video, but should do that sometime. This is actually fun with this. This is actually a brass rod that I planed flat. So yes, you can actually plane brass. You can plane aluminum and lead. Just don't try and plane steel. It doesn't work so well. What's next?
All right, Tiny Woodshop asked.
54. We're going to be pretty tight, so we'll see how many we can get.
I think this is the last one that I've seen.
Oh, okay.
So, Tiny Woodshop asked, what are your thoughts on the Benchcrafted leg vise hardware?
Really good quality stuff. Very, very, very good bench work. Tends to be a little more pricey than I like. And the actual function of the vise is only as good as the person who puts it in. You can get really good work, but as long as everything isn't aligned perfectly and the holes aren't dead square, you're not going to get as true. You're not going to get that beautiful spin. And I'm not as big a fan of the wheel. I have the wheel on this one, which is a Hovarder, and I really don't like it. And I've had it on a few others, and I thought, ooh, I'd kind of like it on this one. I really don't like that. I like my traditional rod and screw. It's so much easier. You can get more torque on it. I really like a wooden handle spin vise. But yeah, it's really, really good stuff. You're probably going to spend more. You are buying a little bit of the name, but if you like it, go for it. My favorite, if I had another one, would be the Hovarder vise, which is what I put on this one with the crisscross. Let me see if I can move this around and show you guys. It is a smooth rod that slides in and out. Focus. 3. So this rod here has a keyway in, and so this whole thing will then slide in and out. And I've got the crisscross on there. So at any point, I can stop. I can slide that in and then turn the wheel, and it locks down on. And I've got that incredibly strong, good vise on there. But I mean, no ifs, ands, or buts. This is actually just phenomenal. You need to oil a little bit. It's been a little while since that. But yeah, I can't say enough. This is just incredibly fast acting and far, far cheaper than Benchcrafted. They actually make he makes a twin screw version, so you can have the fast action of that. Then it gives you a full rotation, so at any point you stop and you rotate, and it will give you as much biting strength as you have leverage on your arm. So it's yeah, I'm in love with it. So I have my wooden screw here, and I have the Hovarder because I like showing both at different times. For me, I think I would go with the wooden screw because I really enjoy it. It takes more time, it takes more work because you have to have the pin board below, but it is a very good vise, and I like that. However, if I'm looking for functionality and just the best vise for doing, I love the Hovarder. It's a really sweet system. So, yeah, if you want to see that, look up the videos when I made this bench, and I have a whole video dedicated to building each of these, as well as I have a 2-year later video where I went back and talked through what I liked, what I didn't like, what I'd like to change. So yeah. 7:50.
I had one more question pop up.
Okay, one more question. We'll wrap it up then.
Ronald White asked, what brand on the Moxon vise you are going to build?
Oh, this is the one from Tay Tools. Like I said, I find myself on the Tay Tools website quite a bit, and so it's here. Pull that open. So it comes with the leather. It comes with these T-screw handles, the hardware, bolts that come through, and plans down below for building it. I'm going to make it slightly different from the plans. Surprise, surprise. As Moxon vise kits go, this one's about as affordable as they get. So that's why I wanted to make this one, because I have the one down there that I made with wooden screws, which I like. I really like it. It's really big and beefy. But I've been wanting to make another one for a while, so I'm going to make that kit. So
how much
cool.
does it cost?
What's that?
How much does it cost?
I don't remember. Don't ask my wife. Yeah, that video will be coming. I'm hoping to make it next week, and so it'll be coming out later this month, early next month. But yeah, someone will pop on there and pull it up.
All right.
The kit's $40. Okay, well, I was going to say, I thought it was, if I remember correctly, it was less than, because when I made the wooden screw, I had to buy the tap and die for it, which were, I think it was $55, $60 with shipping. And so this kit was cheaper than that one because I didn't have to buy the tap, even though the other one was all wood and this one has hardware. So, one of those things. Cool. I think that'll do it. So next week, I think I'm going to actually do a video. I had 3 questions today from 3 different people on how to make a blood groove in a cutting board.
A blood groove. That sounds like something a nurse wouldn't want to hear.
So I want to show how to do that with hand tools, because this is one of those cool things. Because my answer to that is you carve it. That's all you do is you carve it. And that really freaks people out. So I want to show that one off. So Oh, last minute super chat.
Yes, Greg Cheng just said, thanks, James and Sarah. This was awesome.
Well, thanks, Greg.
Hang on.
What's the last minute mom joke?
Let's.
Light even on? It is on.
Just because we're going to end it with a dumb joke at the end. Ready?
Best kind.
What do you call a potato with gas?
What?
A tater toot.
And on that note, I hope you all have a wonderful day. And until next time, have a wonderful day. I'm still holding.
Hang on. Okay.